Denver had always been my kind of town. Not too big, not too small, just enough mountain air to keep you feeling alive, even when the daily grind tried its best to wear you down. For me, the grind usually meant a steady job in project management, a respectable office downtown, and then the blessed commute home to a house buzzing with the beautiful, chaotic energy of two small children. That was my life, my normal, my happy place. Or so I thought. I'm Aaron Taylor, 28 years old, and until today I believed I had it all figured out. My wife Sarah and I, we were the poster couple for young love that actually lasted. We met in college, fell head over heels, and by 21 we were saying I do. Everyone said we were too young, too naive, but we laughed them off. We had a love that felt as solid as the Rocky Mountains outside our window. We built a life, a home, a family. Our daughter Lily just turned 3 and our son Ben was only 1. They were the sun and moon of our existence, bright and demanding, messy and utterly perfect. Our house, a cozy little bungalow with a postage stamp yard, was always filled with laughter and the smell of Sarah's latest baking experiment. She had this knack for making everything feel warm, inviting, like a perpetual hug. I watched her with the kids, her patience endless, her smile genuine, and I just knew I was the luckiest man alive. We had our routines, morning coffee together before the chaos erupted, evening cuddles on the couch once the little ones were asleep, whispering about our day, our dreams, our plans for the future, our future. It always felt so clear, so certain. Then came today, the day that shattered everything. It started subtly enough, a quietness about Sarah that wasn't her usual. She was doing the dishes, her back to me, but I could feel the tension radiating off her. I walked up behind her, put my arms around her waist, and kissed her hair. "Rough day, babe," I murmured. She flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I noticed. She turned off the water slowly, deliberately, and then she turned to face me. Her eyes, usually so vibrant, were clouded with something I couldn't quite place: fear, shame, a deep, aching sadness. "Aaron," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped. Those 4 words, always those 4 words, they never led to anything good. I tried to make a joke to lighten the mood, but the look on her face stopped me cold. This was serious. This was different. We sat on the couch, the one where we'd spent countless evenings planning our lives, watching movies, just being together. It felt alien now, suddenly cold and vast. She took a deep breath and then the words spilled out of her, rushed and choked like a dam breaking. "4 years ago," she started, her gaze fixed on her hands, twisting a loose thread on her jeans. "4 years ago, I did something terrible." My mind raced. 4 years ago, Lily would have just been born. Ben wasn't even a thought yet. What could have happened? A car accident? Debt? My heart pounded, bracing for impact. I sexted other guys," she whispered, her voice cracking. Words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous, slicing through the comfortable silence of our home. I felt a physical blow, like someone had punched me in the gut. Sexted other guys? My wife Sarah? The woman I loved, the mother of my children, the one who shared my bed, my life, my soul? It was impossible. My brain simply couldn't process it. "What?" I managed, the sound a strangled croak. "What are you talking about?" She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, a desperate plea in their depths. "I'm so sorry, Aaron. I don't know why. I don't know what I was thinking. It was 3 different guys multiple times over a few months. Each word was a hammer blow. 3 guys multiple times." My mind reeled. 4 years ago. That was when Lily was a newborn. I was working long hours, trying to provide, trying to be the best husband and father. I remembered the exhaustion, the joy, the fear of new parenthood. And while I was doing that, she was doing this. "Who?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm, the calm before a storm. "Who were they?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping again. "One was an old high school friend, another was a coworker, and one was an ex-boyfriend." The list felt like a cruel joke, a blast from the past, a professional acquaintance, and a ghost from her romantic history. It was a trifecta of betrayal, each one hitting a different nerve. "Exchanged photos," she added, almost inaudibly. "They did too." My breath hitched. "Photos, naked. Of my wife sent to other men, men I didn't know, men who had no right." My blood ran cold. The image burned in my mind, an ugly, sickening distortion of the woman I adored. Then came the next detail, a fresh stab to an already gaping wound. "The coworker," she choked out, "he actually met me. At my other job, the part-time one I had back then, we talked for hours, and when we hugged goodbye, he grabbed my ass." I stood up abruptly. My chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor, a jarring sound in the sudden silence. "Grabbed her ass." This wasn't just sexting anymore. This was a physical boundary crossed. A real-life encounter, a moment of intimacy stolen, a casual degradation that made my skin crawl. The casualness of it, the way she recounted it, as if it was just another detail, sent a wave of nausea through me. My world, once so vibrant and clear, had just exploded into a million shards of glass, each one reflecting a grotesque new reality. Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I trusted with everything, had been living a secret life, a secret history for 4 whole years. 4 years of lies, of hidden truths, of an invisible betrayal festering beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. I walked to the window, staring out at the familiar street, the neighbors' houses, the mountains in the distance. Nothing looked the same. The air felt heavy, suffocating. How could I have been so blind, so oblivious? Was I a fool? Was our love a lie? My head pounded, a frantic drumbeat against my skull. What do I do? The question screamed through my mind, loud and insistent. Leave her? The thought was a raw, aching wound. I loved her. Despite everything, that love, deeply ingrained, still pulsed in my chest, albeit painfully. And the kids, Lily and Ben, their innocent faces flashed before my eyes. How could I tear their world apart? How could I explain? But stay, how could I ever look at her the same way? How could I ever trust her again? The image of her sending those photos, talking to those men, laughing with them, letting one of them touch her. It was a poison seeping into every memory, every tender moment we'd ever shared. It was contaminating our past, destroying our present, and obliterating any hope for a future. I felt utterly lost, adrift in a sea of betrayal and confusion. My heart was a battleground, love warring with resentment, hope fighting despair. This wasn't just about her actions, it was about the destruction of everything I believed our life was. It was about me standing here realizing that the foundation of my existence had been built on a lie. This problem, this gaping wound, it felt insurmountable. And in that moment, staring blankly out the window, I knew one thing with chilling clarity. My life, as I knew it, was over. And a new dark chapter had just begun. The question wasn't if I would do something, but what and how. Because for the first time in my life, I felt a cold, hard knot of something entirely new forming in my gut, a quiet, simmering rage that demanded an answer. A revenge, perhaps. But how could I even begin to piece together a plan when my world had just imploded, the silence stretched thick and suffocating between us? Sarah was still on the couch, head bowed, her quiet sobs the only sound in the room. I was at the window, my back to her, staring at nothing, seeing everything. My mind was a whirlwind, a chaotic storm of memories and betrayals, each thought a fresh cut. I replayed conversations, glanced over moments, searching for clues for any sign that I had missed. The late nights she'd spent on her phone, dismissing it as catching up with friends. The subtle shifts in her mood, the occasional distance I'd attributed to the exhaustion of new motherhood. Was it all a charade? Was every tender touch, every shared laugh tainted by the secret? The rage I felt was cold, not hot. It wasn't a fiery burst, but a deep, chilling frost that settled into my bones. It was the kind of anger that didn't scream or shatter things, but rather quieted everything else, making way for a relentless, calculating focus. I turned from the window, my gaze landing on Sarah. She looked small, broken, a shadow of the vibrant woman I loved. And that was the cruelest part. A part of me, a deep, stubborn part, still loved her, still wanted to reach out to comfort, to make this nightmare disappear. But the other part, the cold, hard part, knew that comfort was a lie and the nightmare was real. Counseling? I heard myself say, the word flat, devoid of emotion. It was the question she'd posed in her confession, a lifeline she was offering. My voice didn't sound like my own. Sarah's head snapped up, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. Yes, Aaron, please, we can fix this. We have to, for the kids, for us. I walked over, not to comfort her, but to put a careful distance between us. I sat in the armchair opposite the couch, leaning forward, elbows on my knees, my gaze fixed on her. Fix this? I repeated, a bitter taste in my mouth. Sarah, you didn't just make a mistake. You lived a lie for 4 years, while I was busting my ass trying to be a good husband, a good father. You were, what, chatting up old flames, exchanging pictures, letting some coworker grope you? The words, once spoken, felt like acid. Each one burned my throat, but I couldn't stop them. Do you know what that does to a man, to a husband, to the trust, the foundation of everything we built? Her tears intensified, silent rivers carving paths down her cheeks. I know, and I'm so sorry. I've lived with the guilt every single day. It was a dark time for me, Aaron. I was overwhelmed with Lily, with the new job, with everything. I felt invisible, and I made terrible choices. Stupid, selfish choices, but I regret them more than anything. Please just tell me what I can do. Invisible, overwhelmed. Her excuses, though perhaps rooted in some truth, felt like daggers. Was my love, my presence, so insignificant that she had to seek validation from strangers, from ghosts of the past? The pain in my chest intensified, a sharp, twisting knot. I didn't have an answer for her, not one she would want to hear. My mind wasn't on fixing things, not really. It was on understanding, on peeling back the layers of her betrayal, on seeing the full, ugly truth. Tell me everything, I said, my voice low, commanding. Every detail, who they were, what you talked about, what you sent, what they sent, every single interaction, don't leave anything out. If there's even one more lie, one more secret, I swear to God, Sarah, I'm done. And so she started talking, haltingly at first, then with a rush, as if purging herself of a long-held poison. She described David, the high school friend, a fleeting connection reignited through social media, the flirtation escalating into explicit messages and photo exchanges. Then Mark, the coworker from her part-time job, an older, charming man who made her feel seen, validated. The hours of texting, the meetup, the physical touch, a casual brush of his hand that became the ass grab, and finally Chris, her college ex-boyfriend. That one hit hardest. A long-lost love resurrected in the digital ether, the intimacy of their past making the betrayal feel deeper, more personal. As she spoke, I listened, my face a mask, but inside a new part of me was awakening, a cold, calculating part. I wasn't just hearing her words, I was cataloging them, cross-referencing, building a mental file. Names, descriptions, timelines. The details she offered, even the reluctant ones, were pieces of a puzzle. A puzzle I was determined to solve, not to forgive, but to understand the full scope of the damage. And then once understood, to ensure there were consequences. I asked her about the photos. How many, what kind? She winced, admitting to multiple suggestive poses, blurring the line between teasing and explicit. And theirs, she confirmed, explicit. The image of her, my wife, sharing such intimate parts of herself with these men continued to burn a hole in my gut. And the thought of other men seeing her like that, men she barely knew, made my blood run cold. It felt like a violation of something sacred, something that was only ours. The conversation went on for hours, stretching into the night. The kids were asleep oblivious, and for that I was grateful. I couldn't bear for them to witness this slow, painful unraveling of their parents' world. By the time Sarah had exhausted her confession, her voice hoarse, her eyes swollen, a grim silence descended again. "I need time," I finally said, pushing myself up from the armchair. My legs felt heavy, my body stiff with a fatigue that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I need to think." I didn't go to our bedroom, I couldn't. The thought of lying next to her, of sharing that space, was unbearable. I made my way to the guest room, a small, rarely used space, and closed the door softly behind me. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness offering no solace, only amplifying the chaos in my mind. Sleep was impossible. The names, the faces she described, even vaguely circled in my head: David, Mark, Chris. They were no longer just names. They were faces of betrayal, silent accomplices in the destruction of my life. A plan, hazy and undefined, began to form in the darkest corners of my mind. It wasn't about retribution in the traditional sense, not yet. It was about knowledge, about exposure, about making sure that these men who had so casually participated in tearing my world apart understood the magnitude of their actions. My project management brain, usually so adept at problem solving, began to work overtime. Only now the project wasn't some corporate initiative. It was my shattered life, and the goal was not reconciliation, but understanding and perhaps a very specific kind of justice. I needed more information. Her confession was a start, but it was from her perspective, filtered through guilt and self-preservation. I needed to see it from the other side. The next few days were a blur of maintaining appearances for the kids. I put on a brave face, forced smiles, and played with Lily and Ben, pushing down the crushing weight of my new reality. Sarah was contrite, walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate my every need, but her efforts felt hollow, almost suffocating. The chasm between us had widened into an unbridgeable canyon. We slept in separate rooms, ate dinner in strained silence, and only truly communicated when necessary, usually about the children. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground, quiet but intensely charged. During my lunch breaks at work and late into the night after the kids were asleep, I started my investigation. It began with the easiest target: the high school friend David, social media. That was the obvious first step. Sarah had mentioned his full name, and with a few clicks I found him: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, a curated life, photos of him with his own family, his wife, his kids. He looked normal, happy, unaware that his past actions were now a ticking time bomb in my life. A cold knot of anger tightened in my stomach. He had a family, a life that he presumably valued. And yet he had been perfectly willing to engage in illicit exchanges with a married woman, the mother of newborn child. The hypocrisy of it all was sickening. I scrolled through his profiles, soaking in the details, building a picture of this man who had, however unknowingly, contributed to my pain. His employer, his hometown, even the names of his children were laid bare on his public profiles. The digital footprint we all leave so carelessly was now a goldmine for my quiet rage. My focus then shifted to Chris, the ex-boyfriend. Again, social media proved fruitful. He was living out of state, working in a different industry. His life, too, seemed idyllic, filled with travel photos and smiling friends. Another man, seemingly respectable, who had crossed a line he shouldn't have. The pattern was clear. These weren't just random encounters. They were deliberate choices made by both Sarah and these men. The coworker, Mark, was harder to pin down. Sarah hadn't mentioned his full name, only his first name and the company she'd worked for part-time. It was a smaller local business, and a quick search on LinkedIn using her previous company's name and filtering by first name yielded a few possibilities. One man's profile, a middle-aged manager, fit the general description Sarah had given. He worked in a supervisory role, precisely the kind of position that might have given him a sense of misplaced power or entitlement. A quick cross-reference with his public Facebook profile showed a familiar pattern: family photos, a seemingly wholesome life. This man who had dared to touch my wife was also living a lie. The more I learned, the less I understood how Sarah could have done this. But the more I understood about them, the more the cold rage coalesced into something sharper, something more directed. They weren't just anonymous figures in her confession. They were real men with real lives, men who deserved to face the consequences of their choices. My initial thought of leaving Sarah, of simply walking away, had slowly morphed into something far more complex, far more insidious. I couldn't just leave and let them off scot-free. That wasn't justice. That wasn't fair. The problem, however, was that I was still in the dark about many of the specifics. Sarah's memory, or perhaps her willingness to disclose, was limited. I needed proof. I needed undeniable, unassailable evidence of their involvement. Without it, any confrontation, any attempt at exposing them would just be my word against hers and hers against theirs. I needed the smoking gun. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that it lay hidden within Sarah's digital life, on her old phone, her archived messages, her cloud backups. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. This was about their accountability. And for the first time since Sarah's confession, a flicker of purpose, dark and unsettling, ignited within me. I was no longer just the betrayed husband. I was becoming something else entirely. I was becoming a detective, a silent, relentless hunter of truth. And my prey, the three men who had helped shatter my world. and perhaps even Sarah herself for the pain she had inflicted. The problem wasn't solved, it had only just begun to escalate, becoming a complex web of deceit that I was now determined to unravel no matter the cost. My attempts to cope by understanding had only made the wound fester, deepening my resolve for a different kind of resolution. A colder, harder kind of resolution. This was no longer just about me. This was about making them feel what I felt, and the first step was to find the evidence. My resolve hardened, fueled by a mixture of hurt and a growing, dangerous certainty. I wasn't going to just let this go. I was Aaron Taylor and I was going to make them pay one way or another. My quiet rage was no longer simmering, it was beginning to boil. And my wife, the woman who had set this all in motion, would be caught in the crossfire. My world was indeed over, but from its ashes a new, vengeful self was starting to emerge, focused solely on the coming storm. The path to resolution was no longer through healing, but through a calculated, deliberate unraveling of their lives, just as mine had been unraveled. This was Act 2 and the stakes were higher than ever. My initial efforts to just understand had only served to solidify my conviction that I couldn't simply walk away. The problem wasn't just a personal wound. It was a systemic betrayal that demanded a more profound response than just quiet suffering. I was becoming the architect of a new kind of future, one built not on love and trust but on the cold, hard logic of retribution. And the first step was about to begin. My hand instinctively reached for my old laptop, the one Sarah rarely touched. The hunt for evidence had officially begun. This attempt to find a solution was already spiraling into something darker, setting the stage for bigger failures and deeper complications. It was making everything worse, just as I suspected it would, but I was too far gone to turn back now. My old laptop hummed to life, a forgotten relic now resurrected for a grim purpose. It felt strange, almost sacred, to delve into this machine that had once held countless family photos and mundane documents, now tasked with unearthing the darkest secrets of my marriage. Sarah rarely touched it, preferring her sleek tablet, which meant there was a chance her past digital life might still be lurking within its dusty hard drive. I felt a knot of dread in my stomach, knowing that with every click I was moving closer to a truth that would likely gut me even further. But there was no turning back. I started with the obvious: old messaging apps, email accounts, cloud storage. Sarah had used a few different services back then, and I remembered some of the passwords from shared accounts or from simply peeking over her shoulder in more innocent times. Each login felt like a violation, a trespass into a territory I once thought was entirely open to me but now felt foreign and dangerous. The first breakthrough came quickly, and it hit me like a physical blow. An archived chat log with David, the high school friend. The messages stretched back 4 years, a digital breadcrumb trail leading directly to the heart of her betrayal. I scrolled through them, my breath catching in my throat, each word a fresh wound. Innocent at first, a casual reconnection, then the flirtation, the escalating innuendo, and finally the explicit exchanges. Photos. My stomach churned as I saw the descriptions, the confirmations from both ends. There they were, the sickening details I had forced Sarah to recount, now laid bare in cold, undeniable text. David's responses, full of crude compliments and eager anticipation, fueled a new wave of anger. He wasn't just a passive recipient, he was an active participant, a predator in plain sight. He had a family, a respectable life on social media, yet here he was, engaging in this sordid affair with a married woman. The hypocrisy was a bitter pill to swallow. The discovery was a profound shock, even though I had expected it. Expecting something and actually seeing it, feeling the weight of the digital evidence, were two entirely different experiences. It was like hearing a diagnosis versus seeing the X-ray. The abstract fear suddenly became a concrete, terrifying reality. My hands trembled as I took screenshots, saving the most damning conversations, the explicit descriptions, the time-stamped exchanges. My mind, the part that was usually so calm and analytical, was now a storm of churning emotions. But through the pain, a cold, hard resolve solidified. This wasn't just hearsay, this was proof. Next, I found an old email account of hers that she hadn't used in years. It was a long shot, but I remembered her mentioning using it for some less important online dealings. To my horror, nestled deep within a folder she'd labeled spam, were a series of emails to and from Chris, her college ex-boyfriend. This correspondence was different from David's, less about the raw, immediate gratification of sexting and more about a rekindling of a past emotional intimacy, laced with suggestive undertones and longing. There were references to old times, to what-ifs, and then inevitably the request for photos, followed by confirmation of them being sent and received. The emotional betrayal here felt deeper, more insidious. This wasn't just a fleeting physical connection, it was a ghost from her past pulling her back into a narrative that excluded me entirely. Chris's emails were full of a false sense of concern, disguised as empathy, preying on Sarah's vulnerability during what she had described as a dark time. He knew she was married, knew she had just had a baby, and yet he pursued her, rekindling a flame that should have long been extinguished. It felt like he was exploiting her, and Sarah, in her moment of weakness, had allowed it. The thought made my blood boil. The evidence from Chris painted a picture not just of physical infidelity, but of an emotional affair, a connection she sought outside our marriage with a man who knew her intimately from a time before me. That stung the most, perhaps. The feeling that she had retreated to a past comfort when our present was challenging, rather than facing those challenges with me. Mark, the coworker, proved to be the most elusive digital ghost. Sarah hadn't exchanged as many overt messages with him, as much of their interaction, she'd claimed, had been in person or through quick deleted texts. However, digging deeper into her social media, I found a series of likes and comments from a profile that matched the Mark I had identified on LinkedIn. Small, seemingly innocuous interactions on old posts, a picture of her at her part-time job, a generic update about her day. But within the context of her confession, these brief digital touches took on a sinister meaning. And then I found it. A direct message buried deep in a forgotten folder on a lesser-used messaging app from Mark. It was short but chilling. "Great seeing you today, you looked amazing, couldn't resist a little squeeze, hope you didn't mind. When are we doing that again?" The winking emoji was like a venomous snake, hissing its confirmation of the physical assault she had so casually mentioned. "A little squeeze, hope you didn't mind." My blood ran cold, then hot with fury. He had grabbed her ass and then he had gloated about it, assuming her complicity. And Sarah, by her own admission, hadn't immediately shut it down. The casualness of the exchange, the clear implication of an ongoing, unspoken understanding between them, painted an even uglier picture than I had imagined. It wasn't just a moment of weakness, it was an enabling of predatory behavior. This wasn't just sexting. This was a predatory man taking advantage of a woman and that woman allowing it to happen. The weight of all this evidence, these digital fragments of her betrayal, pressed down on me. I spent hours, days even, poring over everything, organizing it, cross-referencing dates and times, building a meticulous timeline of her deception. My project management skills, once applied to corporate strategies, were now bent towards dismantling my own life. Each piece of evidence I found, each screenshot I saved, solidified my resolve but also deepened my pain. My initial hope for understanding, for some kind of rational explanation, had evaporated. All that remained was a stark, brutal truth. She had made choices, deliberate choices, to betray me repeatedly with multiple men while I was blissfully unaware, building our life. The laptop screen became a window into a horrifying alternate reality, a parallel existence she had inhabited while sharing my bed, raising our children, and smiling at me every morning. The contrast was unbearable. The vibrant, loving Sarah I knew was superimposed with this other Sarah, the one who sought validation and illicit thrills from strangers and ghosts of the past. The two images clashed, tearing at the fabric of my sanity. My discovery of this proof didn't bring clarity or closure. Instead, it brought a sharper, more focused rage. It made everything worse. The quiet suffering I had endured since her confession was now replaced by a burning, undeniable anger directed not just at Sarah, but at these men who had so casually participated in her deception. My attempts to solve the problem by gathering information had only amplified the hurt, making me feel even more lost and betrayed. The chasm between Sarah and me widened into an abyss. Our separate bedrooms became symbols of our shattered intimacy. The forced smiles for the kids felt like an unbearable weight, a performance I was growing increasingly tired of maintaining. Sarah, sensing the deepening chill, tried harder to bridge the gap. She left me little notes, cooked my favorite meals, offered gentle touches that I instinctively recoiled from. Her pleas for counseling intensified. "Aaron, please, we need to talk about this. We can't keep living like this." But her words felt hollow, her touch alien. How could we talk when every conversation would now be filtered through the lens of those messages, those photos, those sickening details I now possessed? How could I engage in counseling, pretending to work towards reconciliation, when my mind was consumed with the cold, hard logic of retribution? I realized then that my initial problem, what to do about Sarah's betrayal, had mutated into something far more complex. It wasn't just about forgiveness or leaving anymore. It was about justice, a specific personal kind of justice. I couldn't just walk away and let these men and even Sarah escape without truly understanding the devastation they had wrought. The evidence I had gathered was not just for my own pain, it was a weapon, a powerful, destructive weapon. The more I learned, the more I understood that my life as I had known it was truly gone. There was no going back to the naive, trusting Aaron who believed his world was perfect. That man was dead, replaced by someone colder, harder, driven by a quiet, relentless need for balance. My wife's betrayal had set me on a path from which there was no return. The problem wasn't solved, it had merely transformed, taking on a new, darker shape. And I, Aaron Taylor, was ready to embrace it. The next phase of my quiet war was about to begin, and it would not be subtle. My resolution was no longer a question of if but how. And I knew with chilling certainty that it would involve a profound unraveling, not just of my own pain, but of theirs as well. The act of gathering evidence had cemented my path, and it was a path that promised to make everything even worse before it could ever possibly get better. But in that moment, better felt like an impossible dream. All I could see was the path to retribution, lit by the cold glow of my laptop screen. The project manager in me had a new project, and it was going to be executed with ruthless precision. The cold glow of the laptop screen was my new compass, guiding me through a landscape of pain and purpose. I was no longer lost, I was focused. The evidence I'd meticulously gathered, the screenshots, the archived messages, the timelines, they were not just artifacts of betrayal, but instruments of a coming storm. My project management brain, now fully engaged in its most personal and volatile project, had moved beyond the what if and into the how. I sat in the guest room, the door locked, the silence heavy around me. Sarah was somewhere else in the house, probably in our bedroom, perhaps crying, perhaps hoping. It didn't matter. Her world and mine had already diverged into two separate, irreconcilable realities. My task was clear: to dismantle the comfortable fictions these men and to a degree Sarah had built for themselves. My first target was David, the high school friend. He lived a seemingly wholesome life plastered across Facebook: a wife, two kids, Sunday barbecues, smiling family photos. The sheer hypocrisy of it fueled a simmering fury. He had indulged in a digital affair with a married woman, a new mother, all while projecting an image of domestic bliss. That image, I decided, needed to crack. I didn't want to just email his wife anonymously. That felt too cowardly, too random. I needed precision. I found a local community group on Facebook, one his wife was actively involved in, posting about school events and neighborhood fundraisers. I created a burner email address, untraceable, and drafted a concise, factual email. No emotion, no accusations, just the cold, hard facts, dates, times, screenshots of the explicit messages. I highlighted his crude compliments, his eagerness to engage. The final line simply stated, "Your husband, David, engaged in these exchanges with my wife, Sarah. I thought you should know the truth about the man you share your life with." I scheduled the email to send early on a Monday morning, just as people were waking up, checking their phones before the rush of the day began. It was a small, almost insignificant detail, but it was my detail. A project manager's touch, ensuring maximum impact. I knew the email wouldn't be public, but the quiet, personal destruction it would wreak was exactly what I wanted. I pictured her reading it, the shock, the denial, then the dawning realization as she recognized the dates, the tone. Her perfect world, just like mine, would shatter. Next was Chris, the college ex-boyfriend. His betrayal felt more insidious, a rekindling of a past flame that burned away at the foundations of my present. He lived out of state, a successful professional in a niche industry, with a partner whose Instagram was full of their adventures together. Unlike David, Chris's actions were less about raw lust and more about emotional entanglement, preying on Sarah's vulnerability. His industry, I learned from LinkedIn, valued reputation above all else. A quick search revealed he was up for a promotion, a significant step in his career. This, I realized, was my leverage. I crafted another email, again from a burner address, but this time addressed to the human resources department of his company, with a copy to the partner whose smiling face I'd seen on Instagram. My tone was formal, professional, yet devastatingly damning. I detailed the nature of his communication with Sarah, specifically highlighting how he pursued a married woman, a new mother, exploiting her emotional state. I attached the relevant email exchanges where he referenced old times and what-ifs, culminating in the requests and confirmations of explicit photos. I framed it as a pattern of unethical behavior, a disregard for professional and personal boundaries which could reflect poorly on the company's image, especially given his promotion prospects. As a concerned party, I wrote, I believe his conduct warrants a review of his suitability for a position of increased responsibility, given his demonstrated lack of judgment and moral compass. I sent this email midweek during business hours, ensuring it would land squarely on the desks of those who held his career in their hands. The partner's email was a cruel bonus, ensuring his private life would also be in turmoil. I imagined Chris's carefully constructed professional facade crumbling, his idyllic travel photos now overshadowed by the dark truth of his predatory past. The poetic justice of it was almost intoxicating. His ambition, the very thing he seemingly valued most, would become the instrument of his downfall. Mark, the coworker who had dared to touch my wife, was the third, and in some ways the most infuriating. His little squeeze and casual winking emoji were a symbol of male entitlement and disrespect. He too had a family, a respectable job, a life he presumably cherished. This time my target was his professional life, but with a public component. His LinkedIn profile mentioned his involvement in a local business association, and I found a public forum where members discussed industry news and community events. I created a new anonymous account, making sure it couldn't be traced. I posted a message on the forum, not directly naming Mark but describing a hypothetical scenario. I'm curious, I wrote, what are the ethical responsibilities of a manager who harasses a junior employee, especially a married woman and new mother, and then brags about it? Specifically, if he couldn't resist a little squeeze and then sends a winking emoji asking, when are we doing that again? How should a company handle such a violation of trust and boundaries, especially when the manager has a family and a public image to uphold? I then subtly shared the damning direct message from Mark to Sarah, editing out Sarah's name but keeping the core of his predatory words. The beauty of this approach was its ambiguity. It wasn't a direct accusation but a carefully placed grenade. People would connect the dots. The local business community was small, and the description of the manager and the company would be recognizable to those who knew him. I knew the forum would erupt. People would speculate, they would investigate, and eventually Mark's reputation, both professionally and personally, would be dragged through the mud. His casual violation would become a very public humiliation. As each email was sent, as each post was made, a strange, hollow satisfaction settled within me. It wasn't triumph, not joy. It was more like the quiet click of a perfectly executed project, the final deliverable met. The pain didn't disappear, but it was now accompanied by a sense of balance, a knowledge that the scales had been, however subtly, tipped back in my favor. The fallout was swift and precisely as I had engineered. David's wife changed her profile picture to just her and her children, removing him entirely. His social media went dark. The quiet destruction I had aimed for was achieved. Chris's company announced a reorganization that saw him conspicuously absent from the promotion list. His partner's Instagram, once vibrant, became a ghost town of deleted posts. I imagined the difficult conversations, the shattered trust, the public shame, and Mark, oh Mark, the local business forum was indeed abuzz. Comments were deleted, then reposted elsewhere. Rumors spread like wildfire. Within a week, the business association announced his resignation for personal reasons, and his LinkedIn profile was scrubbed clean of any mention of his management role. A small anonymous tip to a local newspaper about unethical conduct by a prominent local businessman ensured that his name, though not explicitly tied to the scandal, would forever be tainted by a cloud of suspicion. His public image, the very thing he had projected, was irrevocably damaged. With each confirmation of my successful retribution, Sarah's pleas intensified. She sensed the shift in me, the impenetrable wall I had built. "Aaron, what are you doing?" she'd whisper, her eyes wide with fear, not just for us, but for the storm she could feel brewing. I never told her the specifics, I never gloated. My revenge was a silent, meticulous act, a private project. But she saw the changes in the men's lives or heard whispers through mutual friends, and a new kind of terror began to etch itself onto her face. The terror of a woman who finally understood the full, chilling extent of her husband's pain and the cold, precise way he had chosen to address it. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she found me in the guest room packing a small bag. My clothes, my laptop, a few essentials. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, her voice barely audible. "You're leaving," she stated, not asked. I zipped the bag, not looking at her. "I can't unsee what I've seen, Sarah. I can't unfeel what I've felt. I tried to understand, I tried to cope, but all it did was deepen the wound. And then I had to act, not for us, not for forgiveness, but for something else." She understood. In her eyes, I saw not just sorrow, but a dawning realization of the true cost of her actions. Not just for me, but for the men she had involved and for the family she had shattered. The love, the trust, the future we had meticulously built together in Denver, nestled against the mountains, it was all gone, replaced by a cold, hard justice. "The kids," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. I stopped at the door, my hand on the knob. "They'll always have a father who loves them, and a mother who, I hope, has learned the real price of her choices." I walked out of the guest room, past our bedroom, past the pictures of our smiling family, and out of the house. The Denver air, once so alive and invigorating, now felt crisp and unforgiving. The mountains stood tall and unmoving, silent witnesses to the unraveling of a life. My world was over, yes, but from its ashes a new one was beginning. A world where trust was earned and betrayal had consequences. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was no longer the naive Aaron Taylor who believed his life was perfect. I was a man forged in fire, defined by a quiet, calculating retribution. The project was complete. The consequences, though harsh, were undeniably poetic. And as I drove away, leaving behind the shell of a life I once cherished, I felt a sense of closure, not of peace, but of a quiet, undeniable justice. The knot of rage in my gut was finally untangled, replaced by the stark, clear emptiness of a job well done. The new normal had begun, cold and precise, just as I had planned. As I drove away from the house, the city lights of Denver blurred into streaks of color, mirroring the chaotic kaleidoscope of my shattered past. The ache in my chest was still there, a dull throb, but it was no longer the suffocating weight of betrayal. It was the quiet residue of a battle fought and won, a justice, however bleak, finally served. The naive Aaron Taylor was gone, replaced by a man who understood the intricate dance between cause and effect, between choice and consequence. The mountains, stoic and indifferent, watched over the city, and I knew that, like them, I would endure. My revenge wasn't a scream, it was a whisper carried on the cold Colorado wind, a testament to a truth finally unearthed. The project was truly complete, and the future, though uncertain, was now mine to build, piece by calculated piece, free from the shadows of deception. The silence in the house was no longer heavy with my pain, but with the quiet resolve that had settled deep within me. I looked at the photos of my kids, their innocent smiles a stark contrast to the storm I had weathered. It wasn't about her anymore, it was about them, and about me being the father they deserved, free from the shadow of deceit. I couldn't make a life built on a lie, nor could I teach them about integrity if I didn't live it myself. The strength I had desperately searched for was finally there, not in anger or retaliation, but in the quiet certainty of my own worth. I walked into the living room where she sat, oblivious to the decision that had solidified in my heart. "I'm done, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor it once held. "This isn't a discussion. This is me choosing peace for myself and for our children. I'm filing for divorce." Her gasp was immediate, her eyes wide with a shock that was almost comical given her years of deception. But I felt nothing but a profound sense of liberation. The revenge wasn't a grand scheme or a public shaming. It was the quiet reclaiming of my life, the refusal to be a victim any longer. It was the simple, powerful act of walking away, carrying my dignity with me, and finally truly beginning to heal. Denver was still home, but it would be a new one, built on honesty and a future I chose for myself.